Today on rLounge, we're coming back to you with another one for the books. This OP can't help but share her workplace's dirty little secrets and evil little devils. Let's dive right in, shall we? The time my coworker tried to blame me for his inability to adhere to deadlines. So, it's been a hot minute, but I'm back. For those of you who have read the Rachel saga, but missed the small update, I will start with that. After I last posted about the small Catholic newspaper I worked at for 14 and a half years, where I detailed my coworker Rachel's very messy and public divorce, including her attempt to convince me to teach her how to forge the signature of her ex, I decided to track down whatever information I could. And surprise, surprise, she is a Karen that gives Karens a bad name. So after much hemming and hawing, I decided to give a small update. Yes, she is divorced. ETA from her second marriage. I do not know if her son talks to her or not. She kept her last name from her second marriage, so she was easy to look up. I won't go into too much detail because she would be very easy to find with too much info. But I will say that a few years ago, she did something very bad that got her in trouble with the law, yet somehow got a much lighter sentence than she should have. Now on to the reason for this post. I have decided it is time to tell you about Roger. Yes, Roger. The bane of my existence. The man that caused me to develop PTSD because of his behavior. But we'll get to that later. This is another long one, kids, so sit back, grab your popcorn, and get ready for a wild ride. First, I want to note that while my mom and son are both Catholic, I am a practicing pagan. I have been since I was 9, though when I applied for the job, I listed my religion as non-denominational for obvious reasons. This is relevant and important for later updates. Secondly, I also want to note that from the time I was 15 through the age of 22, I struggled actively with an ED, eating disorder, and with self-harming. Again, this is relevant and important for later updates. And thirdly, my son, at this time, was about 7 or 8 himself. My parents and I co-owned our house, but they were disabled, so I was the primary breadwinner for the 4 of us. If I lost my job, we risked losing our house. I note this so you understand why I stayed as long as I did after it became a hellhole. On to the first part of the mess that was the last 6 or 7 years of my life at the small Catholic newspaper I worked for, which I like to refer to as the hell years. When this all started, our paper came out every 2 weeks and I was the sole graphic designer. Deadlines were a pain in the butt. Every other Wednesday we were supposed to get the paper out to the printer by 1 p.m., though the printer gave us a good leeway cushion of 3 to 4 hours. We did pretty good always making the cushion deadline, but not always the 1 p.m. But when Tom got sick and Jane took over as acting editor temporarily, she got the writing staff to start keeping closer track of their deadlines and even got enough stories done. And we started getting the paper out by noon on a regular basis. She even had copy ready for me to place on Friday afternoons. On my end, as the one that created ads and laid them out and laid out the copy on the pages, I adhered to a second deadline on the Wednesdays that were off-paper deadline. The advertising manager and assistant were to have all ad copy to me by Wednesday at 3 p.m. so I could get the ads created and sent out for proof, get back to correct, and get on the pages by Friday afternoon. When I created the newspaper pages and readied them for copy to be added starting Monday mornings of deadline, meaning that unless it was the Archdiocese itself asking for an ad past that deadline, it was not supposed to be accepted, unless it was an extremely quick turnover ad, one that the client had created and already proofed and approved themselves, one we already had on file, or one that was small and not a hard-to-place ad. Since I was getting an ad copy as early as the day after the last newspaper's deadline, and the Archdiocese rarely came in with the big last-minute ads, this was not too hard to do. And when I started, I was given full authority to enforce this deadline for ads, since it would affect how quickly the paper could be put together. If I was still working on ads and correcting them on a Monday or Tuesday of deadline, that would be the time I lost putting copy to pages. On the occasions that we did get large last-minute ads, we'd have to redesign pages, sometimes even adding pages, which had to be added 4 at a time, or change full ads. Very frustrating, but rare. But I was dang good at my job. So good that I was winning awards every year on the state level for all papers, and on a binational level between the US and Canada for Catholic-specific newspapers. Then the woman who was the ad manager for the last 5 years, but had been an assistant before that, left, and in came Roger. And everything went to crap. Roger and Jane did not get along, but she generally kept him in line. He was a deacon with the church, but was very misogynistic. More on that later. For this, all you need to know is that he decided that his 1 semester of design 20 years before made him an expert on ad design, which I had a degree in, and he knew better than me. He started second-guessing my ad designs, decided I needed to do them his way, making me redo ads over and over until he was happy, before he would even send them out to the clients to proof, meaning that most of the time he wouldn't send out ads for first proof until the Thursday or Friday right before deadline, meaning that second and third proofs were still being sent out and fixed during deadlines. To make matters worse, Tom got better, had a huge, and I mean huge fight with Jane, where she quit twice. The first she changed her mind, but then the second a few weeks later stuck, and the only buffer I had left between me and Roger was gone. And with her gone, he got worse. He started flouting ad deadlines and started accepting any ad that came in, no matter how late in the process. He was bringing me new ads to create on Mondays and Tuesdays, and sometimes even the very last day of the publishing deadline. This caused quite a problem, as we were no longer making even the cushion deadline. I was finishing up the paper at 6 or 7 p.m. on Wednesday nights, and waiting to make sure the printer got all of them, checked them, that they were okay, or having to go back in to fix the PDFs and resend them. Most times, I didn't leave the office until 9 or 10 p.m., whereas everyone else left at 5 or 6 p.m. Great, considering that there was a meth house across from us and gunfire could sometimes be heard at the apartment complex next to us. But those are other stories for another time. Anyway, every time I tried to get Roger to adhere to the ad deadline, he managed to convince Tom that all those last-minute ads were vital to get in. Spoiler, they weren't. Not when you compare the revenue they created versus the penalty fees the printer started charging us for missing deadlines. It took quite a while, several months, for Tom to figure this out, and he wanted to know why we were not getting the paper out on time. And what did Roger tell him? That it was my fault for not getting all the ads done on time. So, Tom called us both into his office. I remember that day like it was yesterday, and what happened next was the beginning of 6 to 7 years of hell. In all honesty, had I known then what I know now, I'd have quit on the spot and cursed that horrid place on the way out. He asked me why I was not getting the ads done on time. Roger looked smug, as though he just knew I was going to take the entire blame. I simply stated that I wasn't getting the ads done on time because Roger was not adhering to the advertising deadline, accepting many late ads, refusing to send out ads for clients to see, proof, and approve until he was happy with them. Worth noting, most clients wanted to change the ads in ways that made them like my original ad design that Roger was always insistent that they wouldn't like, and that if he would stop this behavior, I would be able to get the ads done on time, get the paper together within reasonable time, and we would get the paper out on time. Tom asked if Roger was willing to stop doing this, and Roger said no. Tom actually looked at me and said, "Well, you heard him." Like, what the F? I said that in that case, there was nothing I could do. Roger said I could stop using the internet and personal email during work hours. Now, every single person in the office had long been given permission to work on personal projects, read personal emails, surf the net, play solitaire, etc. on their downtime, since none of us was constantly busy with work. This included me, though my downtime had greatly decreased, along with my ability to do any of that when Roger had started pulling his crap. So, Tom said I was only to work on work and do nothing but work while at work, while everyone else was still allowed to continue doing all that. Then he did actually tell Roger that for the next few deadlines, he had to get me copy on time and send my initial ad designs, after copy proofing on our end, to the clients. So, for the next 3 to 4 deadlines, almost everything went back to normal. Roger was forced to stick to the ad deadlines, so ads were getting done on time and approved more easily than when Roger was trying to dictate them. The paper was getting out on time, and I got my downtime back. The only difference? When I had downtime, I was seated at one of my 3 computers, literally twiddling my thumbs and pencils and rulers, all while staring out the window. Roger kept coming back to see if I was behind or doing something other than work, and if he could catch me. When he realized that everything was up to date and approved, he would retreat with a very grumpy attitude. Tom came back only a few times in the first 2 weeks, and saw there was nothing for me to do, and I was just sitting there. Just immediately looked extremely uncomfortable as he backed out of the large work area that was essentially my office, not saying a word. He stopped coming back at all after those first few times, unless it was actually deadline and or he absolutely needed to be back there because he was so uncomfortable about seeing me just smiling and not doing anything at all when I had no work to do. Whereas before this, he would often come back just for various minor reasons and necessities. Now, he sent others back to do those things, and yet he never did allow me my downtime privileges back. But after a few deadlines, he let Roger start disregarding deadlines again and taking over the ad designs again. Yep, within the first 2 weeks, I had proved that Roger was the reasons the paper was going out late, and not me. But I was still the one that got the punishment for it. But I was willing to live with that. I had proven I was not the problem. Little did I know at the time, good people, that by proving my innocence, I had inadvertently triggered my ultimate downfall, because that put me in Roger's target range. I had wounded his pride, I, a lowly female office worker in her early 30s, had proved him wrong and shown him up, and he would go after me from that point on. But that will come in more updates to this story. As I said, this is going to be a long one, folks, and it's going to have quite a few chapters. I'm so sorry, OP. It's a hard place to be when you're providing for a family and forced to work a job that is toxic. I wish your boss would have advocated for you more. My coworker messed with my files and tried to get me to quit. Note: first off, my apologies for any mistypes. Please understand that I am disabled. Typing does not come easy for me, and I depend on autocorrect and miss a lot of things that weren't corrected properly. I'm also a graphic artist, not a copywriter. Also, all names are fake. So, there was a girl in our office, Marcy, who worked full-time, but worked half of that time as a writer and half as an advertising assistant to Roger. While she was fine at first, she eventually became a mini version of him. Both of them were bringing back ad copy for big and difficult ads at the last possible moment. I later found out that they had ad copy available long before then and were purposefully sitting on it and not handing it over. Worse yet, Marcy made a habit of telling me she wanted an ad to look one way or the art to look one way, and when I did that, would come back and tell me that wasn't what she said. She would then say she had wanted it to look completely different. She would sometimes pull this multiple times for the same ad. Occasionally, at the end, she would default back to her original request. It was around this time that I also noticed archived ads and art files were going missing. Part of my job at the paper was to make sure all electronic files were properly archived. This included stories, art, photographs, ads, the paper itself, etc. To do this properly, the paper was divided up into volumes, based on the year from the first publication, and with 26 editions for each year, and everything in each individual volume had its own folder. That was then broken down into separate folders for ads, photos, editorial copy, etc. We kept everything going back a full year on the main server, and everything older I would place in the archive server. This was so when we needed anything from the archives, it was within easy reach. Everyone had access to the archives, but it was my job to keep them organized. Since we had several ads that repeated on a yearly basis, like Lenten fish fry ads and Christmas ads, it was important that all ads and images be where I could find them. Images and ads would be linked to wherever the image was located in the system. And if it was renamed or relinked, which was not supposed to happen unless I did it, the image would either error out or print at an extremely low resolution. But since no one was supposed to be going in and doing that, it had not been a problem until this point. Suddenly, a few past ads that I had archived were missing multiple image links. I found that some of them had been renamed. Both Roger and Marcy admitted to doing this for some, not all, of the images. Their excuse was because they didn't like my naming system and thought they should be named something else, because apparently they're renaming them generic Image 128 and Image Fish 3 were better than my naming system St. Gerald's Fish 1 and St. Gerald's Fish 2. But when I explained to them that it was breaking links and making it difficult to find ads and they couldn't do that, they said they'd stop. But after that talk, even more archived ads started losing their links to images. I asked again, but both denied doing it. Yet I continued to find renamed images. They even took to saying that I must be the one doing it and just forgetting. Roger even suggested I talk to my doctor about my forgetfulness or start taking ginkgo biloba. After about 2 months of this, and ads that should have taken me 5 minutes tops to get ready for proofing were now taking me over an hour just to look for and relink images, I was getting more and more frustrated, anxious, and angry. I was back to working overtime several days of the week, coming in on weekends before deadlines to get ads finished and prep the paper, and back to not getting out of the office until 9 or 10 p.m. on Wednesdays of deadlines. Then, instead of images just ending up renamed, they started disappearing altogether. I found some that had been moved to odd locations, but others I had to spend hours tracking down where the original art came from or recreating in Photoshop by hand from extremely pixelated images. More overtime, more frustration, and at this point, I was spending more time crying than not. And again, Marcy and Roger claimed that I must have moved them or deleted them by accident, or renamed them and forgot, etc. My already high blood pressure skyrocketed like 172/129, and that was with my blood pressure meds. My mental, emotional, and physical health took a nosedive. I had started throwing away food and sinking back into my ED, starting self-harming again, but not nearly as bad as in the past, so that I wouldn't blow up at work, and almost started smoking again, because screw asthma and chronic bronchitis when my sanity was on the line. I essentially shut down at work and just did my job, all the while Roger and Marcy continued to nitpick and goad me for a reaction in any way they could. My breakthrough came when Roger came back and the following conversation occurred. I don't remember exact words and phrasing, but this is the gist of it.
Gee, OP, I'm surprised you even wanted to work here in the first place. You're not even Catholic.
I was told I didn't need to be, and it was a good job with decent pay.
But why would someone who's not Catholic want to work with Catholics? Shouldn't you hate them?
My mom and son are both Catholic. I know a lot of nice Catholics.
But it must be hard on you.
Lindsay, a writer who was there and listening to all this.
Roger, ease up. It isn't like she's an atheist or anything.
Turns to me.
You're a non-denominational Christian, right?
That's what it says on my job application.
But non-denominational people are basically pagans because they don't belong to any church group. So it must be tough on a pagan like you to work with a bunch of Catholics.
I just stared at him in absolute amazement at this because that's when it hit me. He was trying to get me to quit. 2 years of intentionally antagonizing me, treating me like utter crap, disrupting my work, though I couldn't prove it at the time, and interfering with the newspaper's deadline even more than before, was all because he wanted me to quit. Lindsay was trying to write it all off as his bad attempt at a joke. The joke was on him, though, because I am pagan. I didn't say so on my application because I didn't know if they would hire me. So, as I sat there flabbergasted, he finally left. Lindsay started trying to comfort me. I guess she thought I'd be upset about it, but I just started laughing. Because now I knew how to fight back. I stopped freaking out about missing files and just rode with it. If Roger or Marcy came back with ridiculous requests, I didn't bother trying to explain why they wouldn't work. I just did it and let them see for themselves. If they claimed they said something else, I didn't argue. I just apologized and redid it. My hours didn't change, but the two appeared very unhappy about my lack of reaction. Roger started taking his frustration out on Marcy and treating her poorly as well, and eventually she quit because at that point, even she couldn't deal with him anymore. ETA, sorry folks, I should have mentioned that this all happened over 10 years ago, and I have not worked there in close to a decade. But I do appreciate all the wonderful advice on how I should have handled it, and I wish I had gotten that advice back then. Geek Girl AU from the community says, people, not a fan. I mean seriously, they went to so much effort to F with you, just because they didn't like that you had a different brand of Sky Daddy? Yep, very Christian of them. The OP replies, yeah, and believe it or not, this guy was a deacon, and Marcy was just the first of 5 women he managed to get to quit. I was second to last and in the group of 3 that quit over a 3 to 4 month period. I have PTSD because of this MFer. Of all the crap I've been through in my life, and it's been a lot, and some of it, a lot of it, would be considered much worse. The one that did me in was this piece of crap a-hole. I'm so sorry, OP. This isn't right at all. You deserve so much better. I hope you were able to find something that worked better for you in a much more positive and safe work environment. That place sounds like it attracted a lot of terrible people, and to make someone quit over their religious and or spiritual beliefs is ridiculous and so wrong. He could have been in a lot of trouble for even mentioning anything like that to you if you had reported him to labor standards. I know he'll get what's coming for him. Karma catches up to everyone eventually. What do you think? And thank you for joining us today on rLounge. Before you go, be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. If you have something you want to say regarding today's content, share that with us in the comments below.